Valerie Trujillo here. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the mathematical concepts that occurred in our M&M activity. So when I was thinking about some of the concepts that occurred, at first I thought it was going to be very simple, basic math, just some adding, subtracting. But as I took a closer look to this, I found that there was a lot more mathematical concepts that occurred, whether we noticed it or not. So the first one being inference and students having to use those problem-solving skills. So as we made our predictions about how much we thought were in the bag, most of us used different types of ideas in order to get us there. Some of us thought about figuring out the area, the perimeter of it, in order to find how many would fit in there. And some of us used our background knowledge of what we know and understanding that this was going to be 3 times that of a normal M&M bag. And so just finding how many are in the bag is a way of us using our prediction skills, our problem-solving skills, in order to find our solution. We also had to learn how to classify some of our objects. So in this scenario, we classified by colors in order for us to be able to make the question simpler and add them all together and make it easier rather than counting one by one. And then we also are able to classify, if you go further down to the second page, we're classifying by numbers. How many groups of 4 can we make? How many groups of 5 can we make? And how many would be left over? So that's just a way of students understanding grouping and how to make the problem simpler. We also have, of course, addition and subtraction. So within our addition, we were able to make this scenario simpler by classifying the colors together, and then we're able to add them all together in order to get our total. So that's a great way for students to practice, learn how to make the problem simpler rather than going one by one. And it's wonderful that we had different colors to demonstrate the different categories, and then also make the question simpler by creating larger groups. And we also move into subtraction, so understanding the differences between our prediction and then the actual, and understanding how far away we were from the solution, so students are able to get a taste of subtraction as well. And of course we have addition at the bottom here, so students are able to test all the different variations if they were to add these colors together in order to understand the sums. And then we also move into inequalities. Inequalities right here. So this is a great way for students to understand how numbers are greater and bigger than each other. So in this scenario, we didn't necessarily put the numbers, but we were still able to understand that these signs means that one is greater than the other. We didn't have any equal to, however, that definitely could be another solution, but it's a great way for students to understand inequalities. As we move on, students are able to understand odd numbers, continue to talk about grouping, and as well as subtraction again. And as we go a little further down, we start to hit fractions and percentages, and we're understanding the connections that they have in between each other. So at first, I started off personally working with the percentages, and for me, we had to understand what was going to be the total of it all. Well, we had to find the total of them, and then we had to figure out the fractions between them, and then from there we were able to divide. So understanding the connections that those all have. And then once again here, we started off with a percentage, however we move over to making it into a fraction, and then we start off making it into a decimal, and then moving it over into a fraction, and then we're able to find our total. And then we're also able to use our problem solving by continuing our multiplication and division in order to find our solution. And then once again, we're able to calculate we're able to figure out our solutions by understanding the connections between fractions and percentages, and we do so using multiplication. And then we would know that if we had to work backwards, we would use division. And then we also have a bar graph here, and this is a great way for students to be visual about how many are in there. And it's the same way that we have our totals here and we understand the percentages, we're able to physically see it here in our bar graph and line them all up and understand exactly what is the smallest, what is the biggest, for those who are more visual learners. And then further on from here, with the numbers that we have, we're able to understand the meaning of mean, median, and mode, and we're basically getting into statistics now. And this is a great way for students to understand how to keep data, for students to understand how do we use those numbers and how do we give meaning to those numbers. And I'm sure there are many different ways that you can continue to grow off of this, having students create their own problems, having them continue to wonder and critically think about what do these numbers mean, how come our numbers are not all the same, how does this completely work, is a great way to get students thinking realistically about the real world and how numbers can affect them. So thank you so much for listening.